All right, everybody. Well, let's go ahead and get kicked off here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to take a little bit of a shift. I know that everybody's been talking about OER in higher education, but we're going to share with you an effort in the K-12 OER space. So we are really excited to share out our work with the Animating Civic Action Project. And we're going to be outlining its development, the way that we're distributing it, as well as some implementation in the classroom. So I will say that for this session, you will find a one-page handout that's in the program description that has links to all of the different resources that we are talking about today. And I'll be including the slide deck in that same space, so you can go back and revisit that later. But let me just take a moment to introduce the team that's presenting today. I'll start off with myself, and as we're doing this, if you want to in the chat window, let us know where you're from and what subjects you're teaching. That would be great. My name is Barbara Soots. I am the Open Educational Resources and Instructional Materials Program Manager at OSPI, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's our Washington State Department of Education. And I will throw it over to Leslie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leslie Heffernan. I teach in the Central Valley School District in Spokane Valley, Washington. I teach high school at an alternative high school, and I teach history, English, yearbook. We're small, so you have to teach a lot of things. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
And hi, everybody. My name is Zach Murphy. I'm the Director of Multimedia and Information Strategy at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. And so I'm always involved in telling stories and filming stories, even very difficult stories. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we can kind of incorporate that process into educational materials for the classroom.
Well, we are honored to be joining you today from two sides of Washington, Washington State. And we would like to acknowledge the indigenous people who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial and who still do so today. On the west side of the state, Zach and I are presenting from the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Stay-Chess Band of the Squaxin Island tribe. We're right at the southern end of the Salish Sea. And Leslie is joining us from the northeastern portion of Washington, where the Spokane tribe is one of the groups of indigenous people in the area. And Leslie, you please jump in if there are other tribes that I am not mentioning that should be.
I would say the Coeur d'Alene, which is right now in Idaho, but overlapped into the territory of what we now call Washington State. Thanks for letting me say that.
All right, thank you all. All right, Zach, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off, and you just let me know when you'd like me to forward the screen, and I will be happy to do so.
Muted. Of course I'm muted. I always watch that. So we're really embracing an idea to tell stories with communities, and it kind of rooted in this idea of co-creation and co-designing for trust, and really figuring out how do we not just tell stories about communities, but how do we still tell stories with communities. And so we are filming in a lot of situations with some stories where kids are experiencing homelessness, or families are impacted by their various situations, like migratory lifestyle, and we really try to walk in the shoes of students and families to really understand their situation. But in that process, when we approach this kind of like a documentary, we get to learn a lot about their life. We get to learn about their stories, their situations, and so that really informs the process of the film. But we started thinking, well, maybe we can do more with this material, because when we produce the final film, we have all of this kind of exploration and investigation that is usually kind of left in the cutting room. So if you could go to the next slide. So with that came this kind of idea of how do we bring people, how do we bring youth, how do we bring people into the process of telling the story? How do they become more involved? And so you can see in the back there, this is working with kids that this was for the kind of a two-day workshop with youth experiencing homelessness, and we started to involve them in the process for telling that story and contributing in the way that they wanted to. And so when we think about co-designing or co-creating a project together, it means that people have, you know, equal say and authorship over how that story is shared, but we're also invested in how we share that story and how we bring those kind of pieces together and represent their kind of lived experience. So if you go to the next slide, this really kind of informed how we started to think about a problem that was happening in a parallel kind of world, you know, over in social studies at OSPI. At the time, Jerry Price was running the social studies program there, and we were kind of scratching at the idea of how do we activate civic engagement in a way that goes beyond just learning what government does in the classroom, but how do we start giving students kind of an agency, or give them a sense of agency to actually act on or do something about this story, about the lived experience. And as filmmakers, we're sitting in their lives in their homes and telling stories with them, but how do we somehow capture that whole experience, put it in a format, and hand it over to a classroom and kind of share that same experience that we get as documentary filmmakers, or like as we're telling that story. And so Jerry was definitely focused on this idea of how do we use story to promote civic engagement. And so there the idea came in terms of like a starting point. And if you go to the next slide, what was amazing was we needed to start thinking in terms of a partnership. How do we build trust, and how do we design and co-design for trust? So we worked with the Office of Education Ombuds, and an amazing partner with me to kind of capture these stories was Danielle Edinburgh. And we started asking the hard questions, and she was incredible at getting us access to community-based organizations. She was a great thought partner. And we started to kind of get to a place where how do we approach community and get them to share their story in a way that was honest, it was authentic, and we didn't want to kind of overly manipulate it and design it, but we wanted to create an environment where we could co-design this story together. And then put that in a kind of a format where we'll get into a little bit later, but you know, how do we then hand that over to educators? And they basically tested it and see, how does this work? How do we build this into a classroom? And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but I think from starting from the point of where this kind of idea was kind of born, and how did we get through, and what were our aims to really bring this into the classroom, that was kind of the journey. But we have a little bit of a teaser to show you that we cut together, so that way we can kind of see for ourselves. In the beginning, there's a little bit of text, so don't worry, don't try to fix your audio. There's no sound in the very beginning, so just read that part, and then the music kind of fades in. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and hopefully this happens very smoothly. Of course, this is always a bit of a fumble, so we'll see if we did that. Has everybody seen that?
I was born in a different country.
I want to get the education.
I grew up in and out of the foster care system.
We used to live like in a refugee camp.
I am from Ethiopia.
When the students are able to hear the story of another person, they feel a call to action. And every time I teach this lesson, I see that they change the way maybe they thought from the beginning, which is how we measure learning, and they want to do something to make it better. Each time you do this lesson, something new comes up, and you get better as a teacher, and you develop a deeper relationship with the kids, and they develop a deeper relationship with each other.
when the children first started at the very beginning with their drawings, they were able to, in their own way, express what they felt a homeless person would look like and be like. And then as they got more exposure to the video of Unsheltered Lives and then the Jared video.
When you're homeless, you literally have, the clothes on your back, and every day it's a matter of like, how am I going to make sure that I have enough food for when I come home from school?
They now have a sense of not just the people who are homeless themselves, but all the people that are willing to help the homeless too, and ways and means in which they can achieve that. And I feel like having that exposure opens up their thinking as to maybe someday that they could also be someone who would help out in that kind of situation.
We realize that some homeless people are nice and are thankful for everything.
When we think about the future generation, that's your goal as a teacher, right? That's why you went in, because you knew you touched the future when you're a teacher. And these lessons let you feel like you are providing students with empathy and caring and action orientation. So when they leave you, they will go out into the world and they will act on these things so that they make the world a better place.
I think that students are able to tackle real life problems daily. I think they're exposed so much more now with social media and conversations from home, that this opportunity of bringing something like homelessness to the classroom provides a platform for them to be able to speak openly and then learn from each other and grow from each other. So when I bring in subjects like immigration, homelessness, stereotyping, whatever those subjects are, I find students to really be eager and wanting to share and to learn more from each other.
Apathy comes from powerlessness. And when we empower kids, we empower their ability to make the world the best it can be.
Animating civic action lessons may be found on the Washington OER Hub, OSPI's online platform, for sharing K-12 open educational resources, providing equitable access to standards-aligned, high-quality instructional materials. Visit oercommons.org/hubs/Washington.
So that was kind of the teaser, and we'll get into that. But now I'm going to hand it over, and as soon as we get
To
back
me.
to slide, yeah.
All right, can everybody see my screen again? I can't see you, so I'm assuming that somebody will say something if they can't see anything. As referenced in the video there by that end voiceover, which Zach and I will be changing soon. It was called out that these resources are on our Washington OER Hub. And this is our online library, our repository for sharing open educational resources, and really the hope of all of us in this field here are the ability to share resources widely and really promote equitable access to high quality content. I will go back for a second. There is I'm not going to play the video, but when you do have access to the slide deck, there is a link to another video which gives you a little introduction to the platform. And I'll be jumping there in just a second so we can see what it looks like ever so briefly before I turn you over to Leslie to talk about the implementation of this resource in the classroom. But real briefly, since we are all super familiar with OER repositories, I do want to call out that we've chosen to curate and create content for our particular repository. We basically have 5 different pathways that resources make their way onto the hub. They are either resources that have been legislatively mandated that our Office of Education for K-12 make available to students and teachers across the state. We partner with external education organizations and nonprofits and other state agencies within Washington. We work collaboratively, contracting with expert educators across the state to develop materials. And we also have small seed grants that go out to school districts who have identified areas of need within their region, and we're able to support some initial either development of new content or adaptation of existing content. We have review criteria that need to be met before we will put resources on our Washington OER Hub. And I will say that our OER Hub is housed in the larger OER Commons platform. So you'll be able to find us there. I have provided links to you of both the quality review rubric that we use, as well as the screening tool for biased content. So you certainly have access to both of those. And educators can feel secure in knowing that resources that we put on our Washington OER Hub do meet all of these criteria. They are accurate, relevant, and rigorous. They support sound teaching practice, developmentally and culturally appropriate, and there is no bias that is embedded in the materials. So let's take a quick look. I want to show you where these resources are housed on the Washington OER Hub. You can find the link on the screen, and so you're welcome to follow along if you would like. Oh, goodness. All right, you should be seeing my screen now. This is a live link to our Washington OER Hub. So if you go onto the site and you are looking for the Animating Civic Action resources, the easiest thing to do is probably just to type it into the search window, and that will certainly bring it up. You could also type in homelessness or one of the other keywords that are associated with the project. So that's certainly one way to find these resources. And the other is to link directly to, we have a working group entitled Animating Civic Action. And as you look on our site for that working group, you can also find the resources that are housed there. Both of those links are provided for you in that document. When you take a look at the Animating Civic Action group, you'll notice that in addition to homelessness, there are also lessons on stereotyping, lessons that deal with refugees, as well as a lesson on empathy. There are 2 resources for each grade band. So there's an elementary, a middle, and a high school level. And I will let Leslie talk in more detail about those specific lessons and how they differ. But to kind of set the stage, let me show you the, well, actually, I'm not going to show you the video. Zach, I am going to ask you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen to show you kind of the foundational video on Jared that will kick off the lessons that Leslie will talk about.
My name is Jared. I'm 24 years old. I grew up in and out of the foster care system. It was hard. You know, if you have a house, you have belongings, you have toys, Xbox, TV.
Oh, it was playing. You just stopped, Zach.
I grew up in and out of the foster care system. It was hard. You know, if you have a house, you have belongings, you have toys, Xbox, TV, clothes. When you're homeless, you literally have, you know, the clothes on your back, and every day it's a matter of like, how am I going to make sure that I have enough food for when I come home from school? What that would look like for us, me and my twin brother, it would be stealing some food from the lunch line and putting it in our pockets, so that way that would be our dinner. We would sign up for sports, 0-hour weightlifting, so that way we could have breakfast and take a shower that morning because we didn't have a shower. It was just day by day. Like, it wasn't, you know, next week I'm going to do this. It was, okay, like, I have enough food for tonight. Do I have everything ready to go tomorrow morning? And then, like, juggling assignments or, you know, staying after school in the library because you didn't have access to a computer, so that way you could type up essays or things like that for the next day. You kind of get a schedule when you're in school. You know, I'm going to wake up, go to school, do all of this. But a bad day would be, you know, in the summertime where you didn't have those resources of school to shower, eat at. You kind of wake up, you know, when the sun rises, and then you're just wandering the streets, seeing what you can find for food. hopefully somebody's nice enough to give you something. If I didn't have my brother, it's a completely different ballgame, because when you go to sleep, you're vulnerable, and having somebody to stay awake and watch over you, or vice versa, me staying awake watching over him, you're just always on edge, and your mind is always racing of like, what's going to happen next? Am I going to be okay and make it through the next day? The go-to spot for us was the dugouts at the school. So, like there's an overhang, gets you out of the elements, which is another thing a lot of people don't think about. Like, it's Washington, it's rainy, it's cold. So you get into the dugouts, and it's right next to the school. So we go in there in the morning. We'd take showers. You'd scavenge through the lost and found box to find clothes that fit you for the day. Maybe you get some new clothes. And then you go get breakfast. And it's like, okay, is the lunch lady watching me in line? Am I able to, snag another sandwich and put it in my pocket? Lunchtime came, can I snag an extra corn dog? Can I snag an extra chicken sandwich? Something like that. If you're able to get extra food, that's considered a great day, because you're going to be able to eat good for dinner. You go about your day, and then you kind of hang out for as long as you can, just BS with your friends, and then everybody goes home, and then it's okay. You go right back to the dugout and hang out, and a lot of times it's just me and my brother, and we just talk about random kid stuff, I guess, and go to bed and do the same thing over again. Me and my brother were really good at meshing and fitting in with the right groups of kids. Personally, I never experienced bullying the way that movies describe bullying. It was always, like, dude, you're wearing the same sweatshirt again? Like, do you have any other clothes? And it's like, oh, they're in the wash or something like that. You just come up with something on the fly. When in reality, it was like, dude, I have the same pair of tennis shoes that I've been wearing for 3 years, and same pair of jeans and the same sweatshirt, because that's all I have. There's just so many things where, if you see kids on the street, just give them a new sweatshirt or a new backpack. Something as minuscule as giving them a clean pair of socks is going to change their month, because now they don't have to wear the same pair of socks for 4 weeks. Don't judge those kids, because it's not like they're there by choice. They got put in this situation, and it's not like they want to be there. I think the way that I grew up, it kind of opened my eyes to the reality of like how bad life can truly get for people. There's just so many opportunities and chances to really change lives. I want to make sure that I take advantage of every single one of those opportunities. If I can even change one person's life, then I'm happy.
All right, Leslie, I'm gonna throw it back over to you.
Thank you, everyone. And just a word to just a little, I'm a teacher, and things are live today in my school. So students might be walking in. If you hear some commotion, it's the life of a teacher. So thank you so much for your patience. We have lessons at 3 levels: elementary, middle school, and high school. And when we got together with the other teachers to start this co-design, we decided that we wanted to really lean into, of course, how do we get kids comfortable talking about topics about students who are experiencing being newcomers to our country, to our communities. We have these stories, and how are we going to have kids dive into these stories in a way that's really respectful and careful, so that we can, I always say to my students, if we're having a hard topic, I need to make sure that I can carefully lead you in, through, and out of the content that I'm teaching you. And I think these lessons really, really nailed it for that. For Jared's story, for these co-designs, the other thing is as teachers, elementary, middle, and high school, this is primarily like a social studies lesson. It doesn't just live in social studies, but we really thought about it from that lens of civic action. And there's the announcement. Sorry.
Is game night / art night.
It's game night.
So please join me 2:30 to 4. Bye.
Thanks for your patience with that. So we decided that we were going to do that. But what we also realized is that Social emotional learning is something that teachers are being asked to incorporate into their classrooms more and more without a lot of tools to do it embedded in their regular school day. It's always like this other little lesson that needs to be taught during advisory or for 20 minutes on Friday or whenever. And what we really saw an opportunity with these stories was to incorporate it as part of our classroom community. So how can we have these stories live within the day of our schools so that we're tackling this as an inquiry using someone's story? So the social emotional learning then becomes embedded as a through line into our instruction. Please go to the next slide. I just want to talk about kind of the structure. We parallel structured our lessons. Every student, whether they're elementary, middle school, and high school, is going to listen to Jared's story in this case. We thought that Jared's story was a perfect example. It was accessible to students at all levels. Every student, no matter what grade level, they listen to Jared's story. Sometimes they read the transcript, but every time they examine what it means to be homeless, they identify how homelessness affects people and how, and looking really at the definitions of homeless and the statistics of homelessness and what it means to be homeless or unhoused, looking at the definitions of it and really analyzing it from a lot of different perspectives, and always holding Jared's story at the center, but branching out and looking at other people's stories as well in the middle school and high school lessons. Finally, I think the biggest through line is considering ways that kids can act. Zach and Barbara both said this so well, the civic action, giving kids opportunity to know that they have agency and that they can act upon what they're learning about is the critical piece. Often that gets left out of our lessons because we're in such a hurry to cover content, but the civic action piece is where the rubber really hits the road and we can make a difference and see that what we've learned all along is really just giving us tools so that we can do something with it. Please go through the next slide. So in elementary school, I just gave you a slice of each lesson, and I'll just talk quickly through these three lessons, excuse me. In elementary school, the launch is really just a Q&A, and you saw in the teaser video, Barbara Bromley's classroom, she just had her students draw a picture of a person experiencing homelessness, and you saw a few examples, kind of what we would normally see if living in Western Washington or in Spokane. It's common to see someone camping in a park on the side of the road near a freeway. So kids experience, that's how they're experiencing it, most kids. The other sources then that get layered on, and that Q&A is that launch to get kids invested and interested in accessing their background knowledge. And then other sources are layered in. Students watch the video, they read data, they do some note taking, and as you can see in that middle little screenshot there, the homelessness in Vermont, kids look at this is elementary school, by the way. Kids are looking at homelessness in Vermont. They're looking at homeless vets. They're thinking about a family that is experiencing homeless, and they're really diving into this source and looking at it deeply from the perspective of that source. The inquiry that students are doing, every lesson has then a guided inquiry. Why do people experience homelessness? So looking at the causes, how have people experienced homeless, and how can we support them? So all along the way, kids have this question: why do people experience homelessness? They're sitting with that question throughout the lesson, throughout the inquiry, and gathering information to get themselves smarter about this topic. Because the big idea is not just to act, but also we have to get these kids writing. So writing about what they've learned, this claim, evidence, reasoning is that through line in history that will get kids ready for that civic action. And Barbara and Kat, who built this lesson, did such a beautiful job. So after listening to all of these sources about homelessness, what civic action can you take? And the support at the elementary level is, here are some options. What might you choose, and what could you do about it? So kids don't have to generate these ideas themselves at the elementary level, although they can and they do. Fifth graders contain multitudes, and they're amazing little rock stars, and they can do that work. But it's a scaffolded support to help them. At middle school, the next slide, we're releasing a little bit more responsibility of kids into thinking about the power of words. And so again, students look at sources, they look at the video, again, definitions, they view the transcript of this. The inquiry at the middle school level is how can we use language to bring awareness to the issue of homeless youth? And you might have seen in that teaser video, again, you might have seen Kelly Jacobson, she was making a T-chart. When you think about homelessness, what words, what words come to mind? And then they do a deep dive into which words are positive and which words are negative. And then they transfer that into Jared's story. Read the transcript. Well, how does Jared think of his story? Which words are positive? Which words are negative? How did he experience homelessness? And how can we use his words to bring a better understanding of the power of words when we think about homelessness or unhoused people? Kelly also did a great job. I think one of the most powerful debriefs that a teacher can do is I used to think, but now I know. And she uses that in this lesson after kids look at these sources to kind of curate their evidence from the sources that they read, and again, claim evidence reasoning, and then civic action. And I wish that I scoured my email and emailed Kelly, the person who wrote this. She has some examples of PSA, and Barbara, I was just going to ask you, we need to get those up on the hub so that teachers can see what a final product would look like, because they're like 10, 15-second PSAs, and they're lovely. And I think having that example for teachers would be really powerful.
Yes, please send them my way.
Okay, perfect, awesome. And then for high school, this is a lesson that I contributed. Really, again, looking at the power of words. I took the middle school lesson and I just leveled it up a little bit. The power of words. So kids look at video, but now they're looking at a greater variety of sources, and they're linked to outside sources. So in Barbara's slides and Kat's slides, the sources are embedded within their slides. These are Washington State Department of Commerce, homelessness from, I think, Department of Health. I'm blanking on it right now, excuse me. But kids are looking now at state agencies and how do state agencies keep track and gather data so that they can make decisions and policies that will then help people who are experiencing homelessness. So the inquiry question for this is, how can we use language and data to bring positive awareness to the issue of homeless youth? Again, deep dive into his words, do some really intense source work, and then create a PSA. And then at the high school level, it's going to be just a leveled up. Claim evidence reasoning, again, that's the through line, is that we want kids writing about this before they create their PSA. I think the thing about these lessons also is that a middle school teacher could use that elementary lesson. A high school teacher could use that elementary lesson. We leveled them so that they would be appropriate at those grade levels. But I have to tell you, as a high school teacher, I would use some of Barbara's elementary graphic organizers. They're brilliant. So I think the power of OER in this case is that we can see that while they're suggested at these other grade levels, they're really appropriate for any audience. And as teachers who are the practitioners, I get to decide for the 125 human beings that I have in front of me, which is, I think, just it's a lovely and an elegant way of presenting OER or thinking about OER, that OERs that we were able to build at this point.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Leslie. Excuse me.
No, I didn't know how to end that elegantly. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that said, I want to leave just a little bit of space for questions as well. I know that we're running out of time. I apologize, I wasn't able to see the chat window. So if there were questions that were popping up along the way, I have missed them. But we do have a little time now. So if any of you have questions for Leslie, Zach, or myself, please let us know.
And I also want to say we're on the call here with Andrew Miller as well, who is the Associate Director of Social Studies at OSPI, and so we're looking forward to kind of working with him on future applications of this kind of content.
I didn't see you pop on, Andrew. Nice you could join us. Let me do one thing real quickly for you guys. I am just going to add a file to the chat window here. This is the handout that has all of, oops,
Here's
all of the
question from
links to the
Susan.
program.
So there are we have more recordings from a lot of different students and experiences, and I think those are available on the OER Hub as well, right?
We've only included these 6 for now.
Yeah.
Pretty much we have wanted to include every bit of those little media pieces. We want an accompanying lesson to go with them, so that there's some context and students have some and educators have some lesson material to think about in that context. So I think if we do move forward with putting more of those media pieces onto our Washington OER Hub, there'll be some accompanying work that wraps around them. But we hope that there are more, Susan. We'd love to hear from folks too that are incorporating these into their classrooms or sharing them with other educators, and just get some feedback on what how they've used in the classroom, what suggestions they might have. Scott asks, I'm sorry, go for it, Leslie.
Oh, I was just going to attempt to tackle that question. Offering guidance to teachers about avoiding making students in their classes uncomfortable by discussing topics that might affect their families personally. I think absolutely. I think creating a culture and community for having difficult conversations, this is essential. And I think creating class contracts and understanding that at the beginning, these are not lessons I would do the first week of school. I would make sure that I would build a lot of culture and community in my classroom before I did this. This would be something that I would do after we'd done a lot of lessons on who we are as individuals, what we value, what we believe, who we are as a classroom community. Give me a chance to really get to know my students so I can read the room, know and understand who the individual humans are in my classroom. And then one of the things that I do is I have side conversations with students in my class, and I allow, if I have a student who is experiencing homelessness in my classroom and I'm doing this lesson, I'm going to be talking to that student well in advance of doing this lesson, and making sure that that it's like in my classroom, especially when it's something like this, it's challenge by choice. If this lesson is not going to be one that is safe for them, then they opt out, or I don't do the lesson, to be quite honest. But I think that if I'm building a culture and community in my classroom that is safe and I can safely lead kids through these lessons and into and out of them, I think the power also is in the debrief. I haven't had kids opt out just yet, and I do have students who are experiencing different levels of homelessness, so living with someone else or living in a shelter, separated from their parents because of that. And I think one of the things is that this also, without identifying the student, it builds capacity for understanding and empathy in a classroom, and it helps that student to feel seen, even if other students don't know their individual stories. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Leslie. I know that we are out of time. Happy to stick around for another few minutes for any of you that might like to ask any additional questions. But with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your conference, and thanks for spending a little time with us this afternoon. Take care.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to let my classroom in and start teaching.